So, hello everybody, good evening or good morning, wherever you may be. This is the Arimaa 2014 World Championship Round 5 game between WO and Belbo. The real name of WO being Hervé Dont of Belgium and Belbo Frank Heinemann of Germany. This game is brought to you by Denny's Restaurant. So, both car contenders, both Belbo and WO, have won 2 and lost 2 of their games so far in the tournament, and we can see that they've just sat down at the table. So, this is the 5th of 6 rounds in the Arimaa World Championship, where we get to see perhaps more live games at once on the Arimaa.com website than we do all here. And it's great to see that there are many in the chat room who will be providing commentary as we go along, and their own ideas and their own perspectives on the positions. And we will be following along here in the studio. I'm here by myself at the moment, and maybe others will join me. But if you are watching this via YouTube, then please do come to the Arimaa.com game room and get stuck in the debate in the Arimaa.com game room. So, for those of you who are new to the game, Arimaa is a game that was developed by Omar Syed and was inspired by the defeat by Deep Blue, the chess computer, of the then best world chess champion of all time, Garry Kasparov. And the inspiration for the game was that basically Omar Syed thought that actually computers could still be beaten by humans with a standard chess set, and Arimaa was his attempt at proving that. But of course, in doing so, he came up with a game that is more intuitive for humans and harder for computers, and as such Arimaa really does qualify and stand out as an abstract strategy game in its own right, quite apart from chess, quite different to chess. And as we'll soon see, it's an excellent game for commentating and for spectating, and it's a very exciting game to watch as well. So, we see that WO and Belbo have made their first moves. As a safeguard against cheating, we do have the moves delayed for us. So we've just started to see the moves come in now. We see WO has chosen an opening strategy which is unbalanced. So he has his elephant on the E2 square there, and a dog immediately behind it, while his other dog is sitting on C2 underneath the C3 trap there. On the other side we have Silver. Silver has, of course, avoided placing his elephant right opposite the gold elephant, and instead switched the position of his own elephant and camel, and in contrast with WO has opted for a completely balanced setup with the rest of the pieces being entirely symmetrical. So now we'll just have to see how gold decides to take this forward. We see that gold has made a fairly standard opening there, bringing the elephant forward to E4 and flanking the horses around his home traps. This is a fairly typical opening strategy and opening few moves, and now of course we will most likely see something similar from Silver. As with chess and indeed many other strategy games, the initial moves by which the pieces are brought into play can be fairly calm, but even in those early stages where there's no immediate contact between the two players' pieces, we can already see the makings of an interesting game. So, Belbo has taken almost all of his 60 seconds there thinking about his move. A fairly conservative opening. He has brought his silver elephant in front of his silver camel, likely trying to prevent any shenanigans by the gold elephant coming in, swooping in, and trying to play any funny business with either his camel or by perhaps attempting an elephant and horse attack around the f6 trap, although such attacks have fallen out of favour in recent times in the Arima community. However, we see in 3G that Gold has put his elephant in front of the f6 trap over there on f5, and he's brought his horse around to the h file. It seems interesting that he would decentralize his horse to quite that extent, but I imagine that he's putting it there to make sure that Silver cannot take full control of his piece there. But we see that to no avail. The Silver elephant has indeed swept round and frozen the Gold horse against the h file, and so now let's see what Gold will do about that. He has decided not to do anything about that at all. In 4G he's brought his dog up to e3 and his camel around to the c3 square, and we'll just have to see how Silver responds. It's perhaps possible that the Gold horse up there on h4 was perhaps a ploy to distract the Silver pieces, particularly the Silver elephant, into unbalancing himself, trying to take a tasty morsel in the form of a horse while ceding a strategic advantage before he'd even realised it. So now we're waiting for Belbo's move now, and he has almost used all of his 60 seconds of thinking time that he gets every move, and now has dipped into his reserve of 3 minutes. It's not very long, as I'm sure those of you who have watched chess matches will know. We can wait for a very long time, perhaps even more than an hour, for big moves in a chess match, whereas in Arima matches it's very fast moving, because the tactics are usually fairly short term, meaning that most of a player's thinking is devoted more to strategy. But he hasn't dipped into his reserve too much. He's brought his Gold's horse along to f4, but in so doing he has also re-centralized his elephant, which is an important thing to do at this stage. So how will Gold take it on from here? So we see Woe again dipping into his reserve, possibly thinking about the options as to where he could go next. As I said a little while ago, elephant horse attacks are generally falling out of favour in this time and this development of Arima's strategy. So he may be considering an attack on f6 with those two pieces, but it would seem fairly unlikely, especially considering that Silver has a horse on g6. So you'd have to dislodge that horse with his elephant, and so his elephant would be seriously decentralized. So we see on 5G a fairly conservative regrouping move. The Gold camel has come out to the d3 space, while the dog has come over to g3. So both traps, both home traps, are very firmly in Gold's control. It's not as if Silver has moved many pieces down that way. So now we have to see how Silver will try and take it forward. Again, Silver has used his lone elephant to pluck the Gold camel from where it was stood on d3. While in the short term this can make any player panic for a brief second to see his camel being frozen like that and pushed over to the enemy's side of the board, It would seem um, very early days yet for us to declare any strategic advantage for silver. As we've seen in 6G, it's very easily thwarted, bringing the camel back over to C3 after unfreezing it with the advanced elephant. As you can see, with any given game of Arimaa, it very quickly comes to the point where the two elephants form equal forces on either side of the board, and you see symmetry going all the way down. And especially in the early days of Arimaa strategy, it seemed very difficult to see how any player could make progress, because traps are very easily defended, pieces are very easily unfrozen, and unless you're really caught napping, you should be able to defend any given piece or any given trap fairly easily. So what to do? Well, it turns out that if you can get your opponent's camel onto your side to a trap that you control, then your opponent is forced to use his elephant to stand guard by that trap to make sure that his camel is not captured. So what do we have there? We have basically a camel hostage situation whereby your elephant is pinning down both the opposing camel and the opposing elephant, and so that leaves your camel free to do more or less what it wants, so long as he doesn't get too far ahead of himself and let the opponent's elephant get at him, which would then result in an equal exchange. Your camel is then free to go and do different things on the board in relative safety. So there's the imbalance, there's the strategic advantage. So what both players are likely going to try to do now is to try and effect some sort of imbalance, to try and make the other side spend too much of its forces inefficiently by holding down all of his threats. And once you've created an imbalance on the other side, then you can start thinking about turning that into profits in terms of captured pieces in traps and advanced rabbits toward the goal. So now 6S, that took 2 minutes and 19 seconds from Belbo, who took a long time thinking about that, and he has come over to B4, and in so doing pulled Gold's camel out from the C3 square onto C4. So in that move we see that both the gold horse and the gold camel on B3 and C4 respectively are both frozen. So if Gold wants to move either, he's going to have to bring another one of his pieces adjacent to them. And this can of course waste some time. But on 7G we see that Gold is of course mainly preoccupied with making sure that his camel isn't brought over to the silver side. He's unfrozen it with his elephant, and now the camel has scuttled off to the eastern side of the board to E3 there. So at the moment it's a bit cat and mouse with the silver elephant trying to hunt down Gold's camel, but not getting very far really. And in the meantime we'll just have to see if Gold can use any of that to reposition his own forces better to take advantage of any slip by Silver. Or perhaps Silver will come up with a different strategy. We'll just have to wait and see. So we see here Chess and Go is commenting for us. Of course, Chess and Go is Jean Daliveau, who is a multiple time world champion, and he's watching this game, seeing two old school players having it out now. I'm sure that we're going to benefit from his insights into how the game proceeds. We just of course had 7s, tentatively moving the camel forward to e6, while also bringing the silver elephant around to try and threaten the camel. And now in 8g, we see that gold has simultaneously frozen the silver camel, saying, well, if you're going to freeze my camel, I'm going to freeze yours. And we see that the only real imbalance in the position is now the advancement of the gold horse along the h-file one step further. It seems more likely than anything else to me that that is aimed at dragging a rabbit down. So if the horse can get up to h6 and then pull down the h7 rabbit there and eventually bring it around to the f3 trap, then that will be an advantage that's not to be sniffed at. Rabbits are quite important. They're not just the little guys who get to the other side and help you win the game. They, especially in later stages of the game, after pieces have been captured and exchanged, they can be very important to forming the structure of position. So now we have 8s, by which the camel has been brought over the northeast trap, and the elephant has moved over to menace the horse on the h-file. That indeed may turn out to be somewhat of a threat, or indeed a problem for gold, but gold has decided to take that and turn it to his advantage. In 9g, we see that he's dragged the silver camel out from the f6 trap, and in fact, in theory, from this position, he could even capture it in f3 on his next move if silver does nothing to stop him through two consecutive pushing maneuvers. So while he does that, he has also advanced his horse. Now, of course, it goes without saying that silver's not going to allow his camel to be captured. But now, as silver prevents his camel from being captured, he can't also then do something about gold's horse up there on the h-file. So, as we've seen now in 9s, as it's just come in, silver naturally saves his camel from death, and he's even pushed the camel back up into the top there. But meanwhile, gold will now be able to pull that rabbit on the h-file 2 steps downwards. So quite a clever little foil there by Woe. So yes, he didn't decide to take the rabbit down by 2 spaces. He probably didn't think that was necessary for now. He used one of his remaining steps to distance his camel by another step, from the silver elephant. Not so much because he's necessarily worried about the silver elephant, but perhaps more because he doesn't want to just be harassed, because every time the silver elephant comes in and freezes the camel, Gold then has to spend one or two of his steps making sure that the gold camel, his own camel, isn't taken anywhere it doesn't want to be. So Chess and Go there in the chat room quite rightly says that this is going to, of course, be a dance of camels and horses, and we see the horse advance there on the H file. It will be interesting to see if Silver tries to counter with a horse advance of his own in the west, because in the west, if Silver can spare his elephant to come over, then in the west he will have dominance. But of course his own elephant is pretty tied down in the east there, and in 10s we see that he's preferred to bring his camel over to the west, to the c6 trap square. So we see complete balance on the west there, whereas Silver's elephant has preferred to stay in the east and keep tabs on things there, where it looks fairly likely that he's going to get his rabbit pulled. Now, of course, a rabbit pull is not the end of the world, but it is a serious strategic disadvantage to have your rabbits pulled out from under you and even captured, because then you have to defend them. So 11G, he's made the move, and Silver has rabbit frozen all the way down on H4. So neither player seems to be particularly adventurous. I'm sure we will see much more in the way of adventurous moves from some of the other newer players. Chess and Go has his own flair, and then you have Brownie, who has really been a rising star in recent days. The big winners of this tournament so far have been of course Chess and Go, but also Adenak, and also the two other players who have won 4 games, Alphonse and Harvest now. Fritzland has been defeated once. He's a 2-time former world champion, and there's a long list of players that have won 3 games, so we'll just have to see. It's still too early to say exactly how things will turn out. So yes, I'm sorry there, we had a couple of problems with the screen, but we're sorted now. So, returning to the game, 13G. Gold has taken advantage of the fact that Silver's elephant is tied up with his pulled rabbit in the east, and he's taken advantage of that to advance his camel to b4 in full confidence that the elephant is too far away to be able to freeze it or indeed pull it anywhere in this next turn. However, given that both the forces, both Silver and Gold's forces on the western side of the board are completely equal, it doesn't seem very clear how Gold can expect to make headway. Perhaps Gold will attempt another rabbit pull of his own. However, it would seem that this could be more easily prevented in the west than in the east, because of the fact that silver has an exact match in the forces available. So now, what will silver do? Well, silver of course can't move his rabbit backwards, which is of course one of the main points of a rabbit pull. But what he could perhaps do, if he's feeling adventurous, which admittedly neither player appears to be, but we shall have to wait and see. What he could do, what Belbo could do, is send in a swarm of silver pieces, and that a swarm can really turn the tables on any hostage or any even a frame, if played correctly. In 13S, it seems that for the moment silver has abandoned his rabbit to its fate, consolidating his position in the west side of the board while recentralizing his elephant to the extent that he can. What I was just saying about a swarm, of course a hostage is when a piece is being held near a trap with the threat of immediate capture. And of course when you have a hostage situation, then the other side, if they want to save the piece, have to bring another piece up to a square adjacent to that trap to protect the piece. And indeed we could say after 14G that the silver rabbit really is hostaged on H3 there. Actually not quite. Gold would need 5 steps to capture that rabbit where it is right at the moment, not because of the rabbit or the horse particularly, but because of that dog. The dog is in the way, so 1 step at least would be needed to get the dog out of the way. But this is still a fairly regular hostage situation. A frame, of course, is when you have your opponent's piece on the trap and surrounded on 3 sides with your pieces. And the reason it's not falling into the trap is because on the 4th side is one of the pieces from his side, preventing it from falling in. But as you can imagine, that sort of a frame situation is far from ideal. In 15G, we see that the horse that was never really in much danger after being pulled up by the silver elephant has moved all the way down into G2 and pulled the rabbit along with it, which means that in 15S silver is pretty much forced to bring his elephant around to F4 if he wants to stop his rabbit from being captured. It remains to be seen how exactly gold will capitalize on this strategic advantage, however small it may seem. It's no small thing to have your opponent's elephant tied to defensive duties. However, that elephant will not be a decentralized elephant, and so we will have to see if silver will really be in too much of a tough situation because of it. Chess and Go, our world champion in the chat room, says that 15G looks bad, and what he means there is that he believes it would have been better if on 15G he had moved his horse around here, put the silver rabbit here, and moved his dog out of the trap there, because it would have won the rabbit outright. So of course, if we follow the moves as they in fact happened, we see of course that the gold horse ensconced itself in G2. 15S comes around to defend, and fairly quickly afterwards gold has finalized the frame. So now the real question for silver now is, how important is that rabbit? Of course you don't really want to lose a rabbit for nothing, and in such a situation you would really want to save the rabbit if you can, but no such chance looks looks very close for silver, with gold's elephant still around. Because what gold has to do now is very slowly inch his way towards a strategic advantage elsewhere on the board. The problem is that if he goes about it too brashly and too quickly, then the positional advantage may be very quickly lost, as silver decides that it's not worth saving his rabbit after all in comparison to preventing gold's advantage. But still, this is a very good position for gold at the moment. Any frame is a good thing when you're trying to get the upper hand, and so gold is trying to cause trouble by ploughing into the silver's pieces at the top of the board, and we'll have to see exactly how he decides to use that free hand. Is he going to pull a piece down towards the c3 trap, perhaps? This may be an interesting possibility. For example, on 17s, if nothing much is changed, then gold's elephant could try to bring a piece around to, say, c5, in which case silver may try to defend with the pieces he already has there, but then it will be like thrashing around in a quagmire. You can't beat an elephant with anything but an elephant. So now 17s, silver has moved as many pieces as possible away from the gold elephant, scattering. But the elephant has very quickly decided that it's going to continue to make mischief, and has moved all the way up there to the 7th rank there, and looks poised to push the horse on d6 down towards his own side of the board. 18s was all about getting the horse away from that immediate danger. So with two horses over there behind the silver elephant, it seems very difficult for gold to do anything much about them. However, silver has been depleted around his western home trap. 19g there, we see that gold has decided to pull a rabbit, which does appear to be an interesting decision, and we see exactly what he's trying to do there as we go along. Meanwhile, the cat has been brought over onto the c6 trap. That's the other thing about Arimaa. You don't really need huge flashy advances. The important thing is that you move forward and accumulate strategic advantages and material advantages slowly but steadily. And this is probably one of the reasons why Arimaa's creator, Omar, likes to liken the game to wrestling. So chess is to boxing what Arimaa is to wrestling. So it's about the gradual accumulation of strategic advantage. In 19s, we see that silver is doing his best to save that silver rabbit, and of course potentially that rabbit could even be a gold threat, but there are too many gold pieces there ready for that. And in 20g, gold just didn't have the steps he needed to dislodge the horse from that position. So of course right now the horse can push the dog next to the f3 trap away, moving down to e3, and once he's done that, of course, momentarily silver's elephant is free. So the frame is broken, and we're back to a more standard looking position. And even potentially this could be the start of a swarm if silver is that way minded. And a swarm can really turn the tables, because if I'm trying a hostage, or if I'm setting up a frame around a trap, and I say, well, I'm going to hold one of your pieces here in limbo, and you've got to bring one of your pieces next to my trap to stop me from capturing it. What if then the opponent then says, well, you know what, I'm not just going to bring a second piece next to that trap, I'm going to bring a third and a fourth and a fifth, until I've taken complete control of that trap. Well then, that's not very good, is it? Ah yes, this is interesting. 20S, instead of just pushing the dog out of the way, he's also pushed the cat out of the way and moved down over to E3. However, it would seem that Gold can right now just bring his elephant down. In 21G he's decided to move his camel along for this purpose. The frame is restored. Meanwhile, another one of Silver's pieces has been frozen. This looks very bad indeed for Silver. He has two very important things going against him. He's got a rabbit frame, leaving the silver elephant completely unable to move, and now his silver horse is being held down by a camel, and the only piece that could move the camel away is tied down to defending the rabbit there. So Silver may well have to make some tough choices in the very near future if he wants to save this position. And of course, the more this position continues, the more Gold will be able to wreak havoc on the rest of the board. He's bitten the bullet. 21S. The silver elephant has abandoned the rabbit to its demise, pushing the camel back to the other side of the board and trying to save his horse. But of course there's not very far for the horse to run, and now in 22G we see that the camel has run inside the defences, run inside the castle to capture the horse where it had fled, and then the dog there on D3 just to try and hamper the elephant from getting in any further. Yes, it very rarely works to flee your enemy by running into his castle. But there wasn't much else that Silver could do in that position, I think. Ah, yes, now Silver has decided to look on the bright side. So now in 22S he's moved over to D3, which puts him in access of Gold's camel, which, on the other side of the coin, apart from holding down a horse, does seem to be very out of the thick of things, because that is the only thing it's doing at the moment. Of course, when coming over to D3, he's also pushed the dog out of the way. In 23G, the dog is back over on C4, and of course, this cat has been brought along to stop the silver elephant from getting at the camel. But it does seem that Silver is trying to also take over the C3 trap to some extent, but it seems difficult that this could be achieved while the gold elephant is still at large. And indeed, he would run the risk of having his camel or indeed any other piece hostaged near the C3 trap. So Chess and Go there was saying that at this stage on 21S the horse could have been just kept at E2 instead of being moved down to the bottom rank there. But of course the game has moved on, so let's just catch up there. So now 23S was this. Yes, so the camel is in, well, it's not quite safe there. It looks safe, but it isn't really. If the elephant comes over to the A5 square and pulls the camel down while moving to the right, to the east itself, then both the camel and the cat are frozen. And the only way to unfreeze them is to bring a rabbit down, which is where Gold wants it anyway. And then the camel is forced to advance further into Gold territory. So it still seems like Gold can make some problems over there. Meanwhile, the elephant is trying to extricate the horse, as far as I can understand. But it would seem that so now we have yes, a horse blockade. 24G. We see that Gold, while menacing the camel, as I just mentioned, or at least, a step in that direction, has also brought some pieces around in what appears to be at least an attempt to hamper the elephant's movement, the silver elephant's movement. Of course, this isn't a blockade by any means, but it's somewhat in that direction. So Silver, the elephant, will have to push its way out to get involved in the action. It does seem that from Silver's perspective, I mean, if I were Silver, and don't get me wrong, I'm no expert on this, I don't have anywhere near the experience of these two players, but it would seem that, at least theoretically speaking, having a camel that's out of play, even if it is holding down a horse, is not such a bad thing, and that Silver might have been better advised just to keep an eye on that camel, making sure that it doesn't actually capture the horse, and in the meantime making sure that he defends his position and tries to develop it towards the middle of the board more. So in 24S we see that the camel has been brought on top of the trap. It does look a little bit precarious, but the elephant can't get to the rabbit above the trap to dislodge it, so no real harm, no real danger at the moment. But on 25G we see that the camel has indeed been pulled down to C5. It does seem very unlikely that this could really be avoided in the short term. Without the elephant around to stop this from happening, it's very, very difficult to defend against an elephant, even if you do have an army of pieces. The board is just too small, you can't hide. Again, the pieces have been shuffled around, trying to keep the elephant away from the camel as much as possible, but of course in so doing the rabbit has been moved forward, and of course a rabbit push or pull is the only move that for which there really is no going back. You can't go back on a rabbit move forward because of course they can't be moved backwards. So it seems that Gold could attempt to bring the rabbit down to the C3 trap, trying to, well, bird in the hand is worth two in the bush, as they say. But we'll just have to see what Gold does on 26G. Now, still going for Gold, or the silver camel in this case. 26G there, but of course from this position Gold would be able to flip the silver rabbit down to C4 by, of course, pulling it down to C5 and then pushing it down to C4 with the elephant. So this is not looking bad at all for Gold. It'll be interesting to see if Silver can come up with anything imaginative to get out of this morass, because he has two advanced pieces down at the bottom of the board, and they look threatening. I'm sure they look threatening, but or they would to somebody who's new to the game. but there's very little that they can do at the moment. So on a 26S, the rabbit bolted for the A file, but that was left hanging for the horse, which has now pulled it down towards the gold side. So it seems that another rabbit is likely to meet its end, this time in the C3 trap, unless silver does anything about it. 27S. The elephant has decided to abandon camel duty on the second rank, and has come over to the E3 square, pushing the dog back up towards his own side of the board, in response to which Gold has returned his horse to B3, securing the trap. In the meantime, both the rabbit and the camel there are both frozen. Of course, Gold has done this at the expense of allowing Silver to toy with his dog. But of course, if Silver really does go ahead with Gold dog pull, or well, push rather, towards his own side of the board, that will leave Gold free to push the camel around wherever he wants. And this really is not something Silver wants. So Silver has a lot of strategic considerations here, and we see, of course, Belbo now moving back into reserve time, which is less than 2 minutes. He's now gone below 1 minute 30 seconds. So very stressful few minutes for Silver here. He's dipped below a minute. Can only imagine what's going through Silver's mind here as he weighs the pros and cons. I think he's just got too many balls in the air here. He wants to make sure that Gold can't capture the camel, first and foremost. He wants to try and stop his silver horse that's ensconced there on the first rank from being captured. And at the same time, he wants to try and keep a hold of that dog if he can, as perhaps his only strategic prospect in this position. Final 10 seconds. Ah, and he moves. This is interesting. He's come over to C4, making sure that nothing can be captured in that square for the moment, and he's also dragged the dog with him. So it would seem that in the next move, Silver would be looking to flip the dog round to C5, and in the meantime, this also effectively stops Gold from trying to bring the camel down to his C3 trap, because he can try to do so, but ultimately the silver elephant is there protecting the C3 trap. If things were different, then the silver camel could be brought more firmly under control along the A file there, but the rabbit is sat there, and that does appear to be somewhat of an obstacle. But you know, if Gold wants the rabbit, he can take the rabbit, and indeed yet another rabbit frame could even transpire around C3. So 29G. Now this is interesting. The elephant has pushed the camel back to its own side. So it seems that Gold has abandoned the idea of trying any captures on C3 at the moment, and he's instead gone over to the C6 trap, making sure that Silver can't capture the dog on C6. So it really is a clash of titans in the west there, but of course we have to remember that silver horse down on E1. that really is a big problem for Silver, because if Silver's elephant gets too engrossed in fighting his opposite number, his nemesis, up around c6, then that horse will be ripe for the taking in f3, or even c3 potentially. Alright, so 29s. Now this is quite clever, because if gold brings the elephant around to c5, he will unfreeze the dog, but then where does the dog go? The dog has to go over towards the waiting horse over there on g6. This is interesting. So on the one hand, the dog has been unfrozen, which means that potentially the dog has 4 steps to play with if it needs to in the next move, but although that's unlikely to happen. In the meantime, he's pulled the camel back down the board to b5. On 30s, the elephant has pushed the dog over to e5. Now this is interesting, because now that is a genuine capture threat, and of course a dog would be the largest piece yet captured in the game we've seen so far, and it seems difficult for gold to really access the f6 trap at the moment in any way that wouldn't put more pieces at risk. So it seems that, well, I don't know, if I were gold, I think what I would consider doing is moving the camel to d3 and dragging the silver horse with it, offering Silver a dog for a horse trade, which Silver wouldn't be able to accept, of course. He'd have to come to c4 to protect that, and then the dog is safe. And yet again, we have a hostage situation. Indeed, with one more step, it could even be a frame, and of course, a horse frame is much better than a rabbit frame. But a frame seems unlikely. It needs one extra piece on d2 there, and an extra step to put it there. But still, perhaps this will be the way that gold gets out of this. Ah yes, 31g. It's something similar. So while moving the horse over to the a file, menacing the rabbit, the horse has been brought around to e2, and so of course 2 consecutive push movements from the camel would plonk the horse in the f3 trap square. So it may well be that Silver decides that he can't get much better than that. Yes, 31s. He's put the dog on f5 and brought the elephant to f4, so he's simultaneously threatening the dog with capture on f6, but at the same time he's stopping the horse from being captured on the f3 trap. But of course, in doing so, he's opened the way for the gold elephant to come around and defend the f6 trap if he so desires. Ah yes, gold can create threats in either trap at will. So now the horse is threatened with capture in c3. So let's see what Silver does about that. Even though other pieces can access c3, it's very difficult for them to do so without being captured themselves. 32s, the camel has been pushed to the back rank. And here we have a gold camel that is now out of service. But of course, no captures today, or at least not this move. So the dog, of course, will probably run to safety. We're using a couple of steps. Ah, yes, there you go. The dog has come back to safety over that trap square, and meanwhile the horse has come over to B3 to avoid the obvious capture threat over the C3 trap, because of course there was nothing else defending the C3 trap, so that the silver horse there could have just pushed the dog over into it. It seems obvious, but it's something that we often miss when we're starting out with Arimaa. So it seems that Silver has come closer to freeing his horse for active duty. So in a sense it's back to square one, but not quite, because he's got 2 advanced rabbits on the A file there. So I think Gold is still strategically ahead here, because while the Silver Elephant and the Silver Horse over there on Gold's side do appear to be quite well placed positionally, well poised, they haven't actually got anything yet. They're not directly threatening anything yet, so we'll have to see how Silver tries to make something of this. And with only 6 seconds left on the clock, Belbo goes for an attack over the C3 trap, but that's where the elephant is, so it seems difficult that that would really progress very far. Of course, Gold's camel is now able to just walk out, although it has to walk out past the silver elephant, so that might not be such a great idea. So let's see what Gold tries to make of this. Of course, those advanced rabbits are only any good if to Gold, as a strategic advantage, if he can make threats out of them or captures out of them. An advanced rabbit is, of course, that little bit further towards Gold, so if Gold somehow loses, because he loses his grip over the C3 trap, then that is a difficulty. I still see a way that Gold can menace the horse there, but that's become immaterial. Gold has actually sacrificed a dog. This is very interesting. Gold has actually sacrificed a dog just to pull a rabbit. That's a very interesting strategic assessment. It can't be a mistake, because when you enter in your moves on the interface, it tells you if the move you're planning on doing will lose you a piece. So this means that Gold, who by the way has 18 minutes in reserve from playing so far in the game, has actually sacrificed a piece just to move a rabbit forward. And it's not even clear that it will be captured in C3, and in fact it can't be captured now, because in 34S the silver horse has flipped the has swung round one of Gold's rabbits over there, but now of course Gold has pushed the horse along to B2 and has now turned Gold's attack around C3 into somewhat of a disadvantage, with what's close to a hostage situation if that rabbit gets out of the way somehow. So once again we see how swarms are very difficult to bring about. Am I wrong, or has Gold got a very, very easy frame there? Of course, if he takes the frame, yes, it's a frame. It's a frame. No, he decided not to go for that. Well, I never. Well, he's brought the rabbit back to C4, and I think that's probably to make sure that it doesn't get pulled over towards F6. And meanwhile, of course, he is up towards the C6 trap, but there's nothing really in the short term he can do around C6. Meanwhile, Silver has got to think about maybe swarming C3 some more. I think what Silver might really like to do, if he could, would be to bring the camel down towards the C3 trap, perhaps pushing the horse in there. There are still a lot of pieces around though for any gold threat, but I imagine that Silver is going to try and get some play out of that. It's still a mystery to me. Firstly, why gold would sacrifice a dog like that, and also how he missed the horse frame on C3. If he'd wanted to, he could have swung the silver horse over to the C3 trap square, and then the silver camel would not have been able to dislodge the horse immediately because of the elephant on C4 that would have frozen it. Or maybe Gold didn't see that, but you know, Gold of course is a much more experienced player than I am, so I imagine he would have seen that. (36s). A very unexciting move, I have to say. Pulling the rabbit back to where it was a minute ago, and also moving the rabbit on the top file along. The top rank, beg pardon. Now you see that really is a hostage threat there. You know, we've been talking about hostages a lot earlier in the game. This is a genuine hostage threat, because if the silver elephant is not next to the C3 trap, then he has to accept the loss of the horse. 37G, we see perhaps a change in stance by Gold. Still a fairly quick move. Moving the rabbit along, which has now been picked up by the dog, and to make way for the exact thing I was talking about 2 moves ago, which is the frame. This what I was talking about before is a frame, and it's in a way worse than a hostage situation. With a hostage situation, you just have to make sure that your piece finishes next to the trap to avoid a capture. But this way, the elephant can't move at all. It can't even take 1 step away from that trap, otherwise the horse falls. Of course, the downside of a frame is that you have to hold it. The piece is not captured immediately, and right now you've got an elephant, a horse and a camel on Gold's side, all tied down to you know, basically nailing only a horse and an elephant to that spot. So at the moment, in this brief moment in time, the strongest free piece is actually Silver's camel. But of course there are ways around this. Most likely one or other of the pieces will be shuffled out of that frame. So especially the camel is an ideal candidate for this, but we just have to see exactly what pieces he uses for this. 39G, we see him gearing up for this preparation, but it seems that it's a little bit of a logistical nightmare, because you have to make sure that the camel is out and ready to move at the same time as you slot in enough of your pieces. But it's possible, it's doable. You just got to make sure that the other side can't score any points against you while you are wasting time, not wasting time, but spending a considerable amount of time rotating your piece out. In the meantime, that rabbit on A3, the silver rabbit, does look more and more like a potential threat, because the gold rabbit on A1 will have to move along to participate in the replacement for the camel, keeping the silver horse in the c3 trap. And this sort of position is always very fluid. Of course, all positions are fluid. But an advanced rabbit that isn't frozen or isn't looked after, it isn't part of an ongoing and immediate threat of some sort, is always a potential goal threat down the road as pieces are swapped off the board. In the chat room there, Super Samu is saying the horse frame is not worth the rabbit, so he's saying that he would not have allowed a rabbit to be captured just for the sake of securing the horse frame in c3. So now, 39S, we see a little bit of regrouping from Silver. Silver, well, his camel isn't really much better positioned than Gold's camel. It's not really clear what it's doing at the moment. 40G is a fairly standard preparatory sequence, preparing to get Gold's camel out from frame duty. Brownie 3141 in the chat room is saying he thinks this frame is worth less than the hostage, and in a way, on balance, it could well be right because of the number of pieces that have to be tied down to making sure that the frame still holds. But I suppose it all depends on the other player. You have to play the man, not the ball, as they say. And I'm not sure that Silver is going to do anything particularly terrible in the next few moves that would make enough problems for Gold, such that all the time he's spending now getting his camel out from frame duty are not worth it. We look at the time on the clocks and we see that Woe has built up his reserve to a whopping 21 minutes. A reserve that he is unlikely to need much of. And in the meantime, Silver, Belbo, has used 1 minute 31 seconds and has only 15 seconds on the clock. So I'm sure that his adrenaline levels are much higher. But in 40S, he has found a job for his camel, and the job for his camel is harassing that horse there. So of course, if Gold on 41G had not done what he's just done, which is getting the camel out of the way, then that Silver camel would have been able to pull the Gold horse out from a B3, thus breaking the frame. The thing is, it may well be that this is precisely where Silver's camel wanted to be in the first place. Although apparently not, he's scooching over to that side again. But while all three of Gold's heavy pieces are busy with the frame, it would have seemed possible for Silver's camel to try something against the F3 trap square, perhaps that horse there on G3, but I don't know, that's just me. So now we see the camel is being rotated out on 42G. After just one more move, the camel will be free. But of course, as always with these things, you have to make sure that you don't fall into the trap of viewing frames or hostages as in any way permanent or binding. At any point that Silver decides that he has bigger fish to fry than stopping his horse from being captured, he has to he can just step away, and so Gold has to be very careful about how he uses his camel. If he puts his camel in a situation whereby it's an easy target for Silver, then Silver is just going to abandon that horse. So we see in 42 after 42S a repeat of what we saw a couple of moves ago, but this time the C5 square is occupied. There's a dog on that square, so it's not possible for Gold to flip the camel over to the D file like he did a minute ago. So now perhaps it's Woe who will dip into his reserve now. Just to explain something. Ah yes, and the frame is broken. Just to explain something, we see now, after Woe has moved, that he has a reserve of 22 minutes. While he was moving, we saw that his reserve was 3 minutes. The thing with that is that you are not allowed to use all of your reserve at once. If we had it that way, then we would be sat here for 20 minutes waiting for somebody to move. But what this means is that, let's say for sake of argument that Woe a minute ago had used all 3 of his reserve minutes, then next move all 3 of those reserve minutes would be replenished from the overall reserve of 20 minutes. The way these clocks have been organised is very specific to Arimaa, and it's part of what makes them so easy to watch and so easy to commentate on. It keeps the game moving, it keeps it fluid, and I like it. It keeps it exciting and keeps it, keeps it moving. In 43G, as we just said there, the frame has been broken. Gold saw that he would have to abandon it, and so this has completely changed the dynamic of the position. Silver now has to decide what he's going to do now. It seems quite clear that the way things are at the moment, there's no chance of him really doing much on C3. But it's possible that he could try to menace the camel. Yes. While moving the horse out of the way, he's decided to pull a cat out onto C4. Of course, getting that cat to C4 cost him 4 steps, and moving the cat back, because it's not frozen, will only take 2 steps, as we just saw in 44G there. So perhaps that wasn't the best thing to do. But there we go. 44G. Gold used the other 2 steps to just shift his camel along a little bit further away from the elephant. So now it's up to well, both players to try and see what they will make of this position now. At the moment, Gold is down materially. He made that sacrifice of a dog that I still don't understand, all the way back those few moves ago. And they've both lost a rabbit. So in terms of material, Silver is ahead. But Silver again has those 2 advanced rabbits that could well turn out to be a thorn in his side. But we'll just have to see about that, because in this position, Gold is also unlikely to be able to make any captures on C3. He's very hampered, actually. Those rabbits on the A file, those other pieces all around, I mean that Gold doesn't have that much room for manoeuvre himself. Silver again dips into his final 10 seconds, and it would be a crying shame if he lost on time. Yes, Silver has lost on time. What a crying shame. Just when the game was starting to get interesting. That is a real shame, and we'll just have to see what everybody says in the chat room about that. Because it seemed that Silver had a real chance there, and it's not a letdown, of course, it's part of the game, but it would have been nice to see how the game turned out eventually. But then again, it's also testament to how Belbo was continually on the back foot throughout the game. Despite the piece count, it was Woe who was the one keeping him on his toes. Brownie3141 says that Silver had a winning position towards the end of the game, clearly winning, he said. And indeed, on balance, his elephant is more centralized. So, thank you very much for listening. My name is Joel Thomas. My login in the Arimaa.com game room is Megajester. This has been the first World Championships that have ever been broadcast via YouTube, and so next week will be our grand finale, I think. The final games of the World Championship will be particularly interesting to watch, as players who are closer together in rating will be likely to be paired, and we'll see the first players being eliminated from the tournament, and we will see the next stage in the progress of the Arimaa community. Of course, later on this year we have the other championships. There's the Computer Championship and the Human versus Computer Championship, which is the Arimaa Challenge. And of course the Arimaa Challenge is Omar Syed's challenge to bot developers to come up with a computer program, an Arimaa program that can be played on an off-the-shelf, that can run on an off-the-shelf computer that will beat the world champion at or even very good players at Arimaa. And there's a prize in store for any programmer who can do it, but none have yet, and it will still be open up until 2020. So if you fancy your chances as a bot developer, then get stuck in. Come over and see what's going on over at Arimaa.com. But in the meantime, it's been my pleasure to watch this game with you and present my humble commentary, and I hope that you'll be with us next week as we see the 6th and final round of the World Championship. So this was brought to you by Denny's, and we'd like to thank everybody who is commenting in the chat room and who's been involved with the World Championship so far. So we hope to see you again, and as I say, thank you for watching, and good night.